No one in the building heard the exact moment a life split in two, but it happened at 9:07 a.m., somewhere between the low hum of fluorescent lights and the soft click of a glass conference room door closing. The sentence that caused it sounded harmless, ordinary even, yet the echo of those words would quietly reshape futures long after the room fell silent. If you believe that character matters more than titles, and that integrity shows itself when no one is watching, go ahead and like and subscribe as this story begins, because what unfolds next proves how powerful a single choice can be. Ethan Cole stood outside Conference Room B, smoothing the front of his navy work shirt with hands roughened by years of labor. No one noticed until something went wrong. Sterling Dynamics towered around him in steel and glass, its executive floor smelling of polished surfaces and expensive coffee. He had worked maintenance in this building for 6 years, yet every time he was summoned upstairs, he felt like a visitor in a world not built for him. The email had arrived that morning without explanation. Report to Conference Room B at 9 a.m., and he'd read it while packing his daughter Lily's lunch, her small chest rising unevenly as she slept on the couch, asthma flaring again with the cold. He'd hesitated at the door, inhaler in hand, then gone anyway. Rent didn't wait for fear. Inside the conference room, everything gleamed. The table was glass, the chairs leather, the city skyline framed perfectly behind the woman seated at the head. Claire Sterling, CEO. Blonde, composed, and unervingly precise. She didn't stand. She didn't offer a greeting. She slid a folder across the table and said, without hesitation, "You're fired. Today." The words landed flat, not cruel, just final. Ethan felt his chest tighten as his mind raced through numbers he already knew by heart. Medication, utilities, food. He nodded once. "I understand," he said, surprised by the steadiness of his own voice. Claire watched him closely, as if waiting for an outburst that never came. Ethan didn't argue. He didn't plead. He'd learned long ago that panic only made things worse, and Lily needed him calm more than she needed him angry. He glanced at the folder, unopened. "Before I go," he said quietly, "may I say something?" She gestured for him to continue. "There's a pipe above the East Wing server room," he said. "It's been leaking for months. I filed reports. If it bursts, it'll flood the servers. You'll lose critical data." He shrugged faintly. "I just thought someone should know." The silence stretched. Claire leaned back, studying him. "Most people would be defending themselves right now," she said. "You didn't even ask why." Ethan met her gaze. "It wouldn't change anything," he replied. "And my daughter's watching how I handle things." Something shifted then, subtle but real. Claire stood, walked to the window, then turned back with a different expression. "You weren't fired," she said. Ethan blinked. She slid a second folder across the table. "That was a test," she continued. "I needed to see what someone would do when they believed they had nothing left to gain." Inside the folder was a new contract, Director of Operations, along with a salary that made his breath catch and a handwritten note in the margin, integrity scales. Claire met his eyes. "If you accept," she said, "you start Monday." Outside, the city moved on, unaware that a man who fixed broken things had just stepped into a moment that would change far more than his own life. Power doesn't announce itself when it arrives. It waits, watching to see who will misuse it and who will carry it carefully. Ethan Cole learned that lesson in the quiet moments after signing the contract, when the weight of his new title settled not in his chest, but in his conscience. Director of Operations. The words looked unreal on the page, like they belonged to someone else. Yet as he stepped out of the executive elevator later that morning, the building felt different. Not bigger, not smaller, just closer, like he could finally see the bones beneath the polished surface. The first thing Ethan noticed wasn't the deference. It was the fear. Conversations lowered when he walked by. People straightened, uncertain which version of him they were supposed to respond to. The maintenance worker who knew the building's flaws by heart, or the executive whose signature could change lives. He remembered that feeling all too well. Fear made people hide mistakes. It made them protect themselves instead of the truth. So in his first meeting, seated at the same glass table where his life had almost unraveled, Ethan did something unexpected. He asked questions no one had asked in years. Not about profits or projections, but about systems, about bottlenecks, about who was always overworked and who was never heard. The room had gone quiet. executives exchanging glances as if unsure whether this was some kind of test. Claire watched from the far end, unreadable, saying nothing. Ethan spent his first week walking the building instead of staying in his office. He listened. He learned names. He noticed the way facilities requests disappeared into digital voids, and how frontline employees quietly compensated for broken processes with unpaid overtime and exhaustion. He found the pipe above the East Wing's server room and shut it down himself, standing ankle-deep in water while a young technician stared at him in disbelief. "I thought directors didn't do this kind of work," the technician said. Ethan smiled. "Someone has to," he replied. Word traveled fast. Not as a rumor, but as a recalibration. Something had shifted. Resistance followed. It always did. A senior manager challenged him in a budget meeting, questioning whether emotional leadership had a place in a data-driven company. Ethan didn't argue. He simply laid out the numbers: downtime reduced, turnover dropping, safety incidents declining. "This isn't emotional," he said calmly. "It's efficient." The room had no rebuttal for that. Claire met his eyes across the table and gave the slightest nod, an acknowledgement that felt heavier than applause. At home, Lily noticed the change before anyone else. He came home earlier. He smiled more. He listened without distraction. When her inhaler prescription was renewed without hesitation or fear, she looked up at him and asked, "Did something good happen at work?" Ethan laughed softly. "Something important did," he said. But late at night, when the apartment was quiet, the doubt crept in. He wondered how long he'd be allowed to stay, whether the test had truly ended, or if this was just another phase of it. The answer came 3 months later, when a data breach narrowly avoided disaster thanks to a systems overhaul Ethan had insisted on, despite initial resistance. The board praised Claire for the company's resilience, but she redirected the credit without hesitation. "This happened because someone chose integrity over ego," she said, eyes briefly finding Ethan's. In that moment, he understood something vital. Leadership wasn't about being seen. It was about building structures that held when no one was looking. And as Sterling dynamics stabilized and strengthened, Ethan realized he wasn't just filling a role. He was redefining what power could look like when carried by someone who remembered what it felt like to have none. Legacy doesn't arrive all at once. It doesn't knock, doesn't demand attention, and doesn't announce itself with applause. It accumulates quietly, layered moment by moment, choice by choice, until one day you look back and realize the ground beneath you is solid because of what you built when no one was watching. Ethan Cole didn't understand that at first. For a long time, he still felt like a guest in his own office, like someone might tap him on the shoulder and remind him he didn't belong there. But the company began to change in ways that could no longer be dismissed as coincidence, and slowly, unmistakably, Ethan realized it wasn't changing around him. It was changing because of him. Sterling Dynamics became a place where problems surfaced early instead of being buried. Employees spoke up without rehearsing fear into their voices. Maintenance tickets were no longer treated as inconveniences, but as early warnings. Ethan redesigned operational meetings so the people closest to the work spoke first and executives listened last. It was uncomfortable at times. Pride always resisted redistribution, but results silenced critics faster than arguments ever could. Equipment failures dropped. Emergency costs shrank. Productivity climbed without squeezing people dry. Claire Sterling watched all of it with careful attention, stepping in less and less, trusting more and more. For the first time in her career, she felt the strange relief of knowing the company would survive even if she stepped away. At home, the changes were even more profound. Lily no longer counted inhaler puffs like something precious. Doctor visits were routine instead of terrifying. One evening, as Ethan helped her with homework at the small kitchen table, she looked up and asked, "Are you still scared you'll lose your job?" The question caught him off guard. He thought about it for a moment before answering honestly. "Not like I used to," he said. Lily nodded, satisfied, as if that answer completed something she'd been quietly tracking all along. Children notice stability the way sailors noticed calm seas, not by analyzing them, but by finally sleeping through the night. The real test of Ethan's leadership arrived during a year no one would forget. Markets contracted. Clients froze spending. Panic crept into boardrooms across the country. Layoff plans circulated like inevitabilities disguised as strategy. Sterling Dynamics was not immune. Projections showed hard choices ahead, and the board convened in the same glass room where Ethan had once been told his life was over. This time, he sat at the table by right, not by invitation. One by one, executives presented options, each involving cuts that would fall hardest on the people least able to absorb them. When it was Ethan's turn to speak, the room expected numbers. Instead, he told a story. He spoke about a night shift technician who kept servers running during a blackout, about a single mother in logistics who'd worked through pneumonia because she feared missing a paycheck, about the pipe in the East Wing that everyone ignored until it almost destroyed everything. We can cut jobs and survive on paper, Ethan said calmly. Or we can protect the people who actually keep this place alive and survive in reality. He proposed shared sacrifice, bonuses paused, executive compensation reduced, investments delayed instead of eliminated. Silence followed, then questions, then resistance, then, slowly, agreement. When the downturn passed, Sterling Dynamics emerged bruised but intact. No mass layoffs, no shattered trust. Competitors struggled to rehire talent that had fled them. Sterling didn't need to. People stayed. Loyalty, it turned out, was a competitive advantage no spreadsheet could fully capture. Years later, at a milestone anniversary celebration, Claire Sterling took the stage before hundreds of employees. She didn't speak about stock prices or expansion. She told a story from years earlier, about a maintenance worker called into a conference room and handed a folder that could have ended his life as he knew it. She admitted something few CEOs ever did. That morning, she said, I thought I was testing someone else. I didn't realize I was testing myself. She spoke about fear, about power, about how easy it was to mistake authority for leadership. Then she looked toward Ethan, standing near the back, uncomfortable with the attention. This company didn't change because of strategy, she said. It changed because one person chose integrity when he believed it cost him everything. Applause filled the room, but Ethan barely heard it. He was thinking about Lily, now older, healthier, talking about engineering and systems and fixing things that matter. He was thinking about the pipe, the test, the sentence that had once split his life in two. He finally understood that legacy wasn't what people said about you when you succeeded. It was what remained standing when you were gone. And in that moment, Ethan knew, with a quiet certainty, that the words meant to end him had done something far greater. They had built him.